What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Bed Boys, your one-stop shop for all your energy drink reviews and performance talks. I'm Christian.
I'm Brian.
And we are the Bed Boys. And after some scheduling issues, we are back. We are back finally. We were joking earlier that our final boss is a goddamn calendar. But as is the profession, we've both been a little bit more busy than usual, but we are here ready to get back into it. So, getting us started off today, I got a drink that I've tried about every other flavor of this brand. It's a very popular brand, especially with the Bet Boys. It's a new flavor. It's very similar to one that they previously did, but I'm not sure if it's going to taste the same. So today I picked up the Ghost Blue Raspberry. It is that new. I like that they put the new on the label. It's very similar to, it reminds me of the Ghost Sour Patch Kids Blue Raspberry, but I do not know if it is going to taste the exact same or if they're going to switch up the formula as far as the flavor profile. Regular Ghost formula, but the flavor is new. And as we've talked about ad nauseum, they're no longer going to have the Sour Patch Kids flavor, so this is kind of their replacement for that, I would assume. So I've seen it on Instagram and a few times at a gas station, just haven't picked it up. So I really wanted to give it a try. Walked my ass to the QT and picked one up the last night. So I'm excited to dive in.
I just drank one of those when I was stuck in Boston, which we can get to later.
Is a good story for the podcast.
And just so anyone is aware, we do have a part 1 and part 2 of this episode. Because of that, and we know that it's essentially going to be 2 episodes, I'm not going to come in without 2 drinks. So, of course, I have one that we just talked about recently, and it caught some good compliments. The Sour Patch Rise, or sorry, not Sour Patch, Sour Punch Rise. 200 milligrams of caffeine, 500 milligrams of taurine, and 200 milligrams of choline. Great flavor. I had it actually the day that we talked about it. I got up, took my happy ass over to Vitamin Shop, and then immediately started pounding one of these. Love it, but I'm gonna officially have it in front of everybody. But I got a new one to start with. Everybody loves their water. Everybody is here or there on their sodas. I'm here to find out if their energy drinks are any good. I got the Liquid Death energy drink.
Ooh, I've been seeing that, and I've been interested to try that as well. I almost bought it, but I felt like it was too risky. I didn't want to pick up something that tasted like shit. So I'm glad that you did that.
I took one for the team. Incredible value because it's $1 at Vitamin Shop right now, and I don't know what that means. Is that good, and they're just trying to get people's hands on it, or are they like, oh shit, we got to get rid of this stock? I think the can looks great. I do like the blue and the white, blue white with the darker shade, a little bit of gold. Obviously, Liquid Death does a great job marketing. That's one thing that they've always been able to do pretty well. Unextreme caffeine equals 1 coffee. That's a bad look. Natural energy source plus vitamins boost metabolism. That's 2 strikes, homie. Death to drowsy. This flavor is called Tropical Terror. So I'm assuming some kind of tropical mix. Really, really simple formula. 5 calories, 2 carbs in it. Vitamin C, it's going to have 60% of the daily value at 54 milligrams. Vitamin B12, 60% daily value. Magnesium, 10%. So that's kind of neat. But 100 milligrams of caffeine. That's where it's kind of losing me. And I think it's because it's not like Bum, where you're going to get 112 to 150 milligrams. And by the way, here's a full dose nootropic in there as well. It's just caffeine. And I have a feeling that this is either going to be pretty good or terrible. I don't know if it's going to be great. I know it's not going to be like a So I guess without further ado, let's pop these tops and talk some shops. Oh, yeah. That was a flat pop.
Are you a fan of their water? I think I've had their water once. I wasn't a huge fan personally.
I like the still water, but that's just because it's water. I don't like paying for it. But like the sparkling water's always had an odd flavor to me.
Mm-hmm. I've been on the Topo Chico grind lately.
Incredible grind.
Pretty good. Ooh. Brian, you look disgusted.
It's a fucking pina colada.
Oh. This guy hates pina colada.
Oh, that's like the worst flavor for an energy drink ever.
Damn, he's got to go right to the rise to get that nasty taste out of his mouth. That must be really bad.
Here's the thing. If you like pina coladas, you'll probably like it. I love pineapple flavor. I hate coconut in liquid form. I think there is nothing worse than coconut in liquid form. It's disgusting. Throw coconut and some dark chocolate with sea salt. Tastes great. Throw coconut in regular chocolate like a Mounds Bar or an Almond Joy. Put coconut on a cake. Toast coconut on a donut. Literally, it's perfect for any sweet or baked goods. It is not for drink. I'm not a huge fan of Body Armor because the coconut water, like you can just taste the coconut. I understand it's hydrating. I don't need to hydrate. I need to caffeinate. Chat, clip that. Yeah.
This ghost is very good.
How do you, when you think of the flavor on that versus like the Sour Patch Kids, like the SPK Blue Raz, I feel like this is like, our assumption would have been, hey, they're just going to swap that label and take a little bit of like the sour out. And I think it's really different. You obviously can only go so different when you go from Blue Raz to Blue Raz, but it is a distinctly different taste.
Yeah, it's more of a less sour, a little bit more sweet. I mean, it has it right there on the label. It's like the blue slushy that you get at a gas station.
Yeah.
That's really the best way to describe it, is it's like a liquefied blue Slurpee.
It reminds me of, do you remember the ices with the polar bear that was like surfing on them?
Yes.
It reminds me of the blue one of those, which was so good.
Yep. You'd pull up in the summer gas station. They'd have like the red and the blue. Sometimes they'd have like a Coca-Cola flavor too.
The Coca-Cola ripped.
Yep.
I used to mix the Coca-Cola and the blue.
Yeah, I remember if you go to like Adventureland, which is an amusement park in Iowa, you could get like a ridiculously tall like cup, and then they'd have all like 20 flavors of like these slushies, and you could just fill it up with whatever you want.
Isn't Adventureland like a... Yeah, it's a movie. I was like...
Oh, really? Look up Adventureland, like Des Moines, Iowa.
Adventureland is a movie with Jesse Eisenberg, the guy from like Zombieland.
Okay, well, that's not the one I'm thinking of. Yeah, it's in Altoona, suburb of Des Moines.
Altoona. Yeah, oh, they're temporarily closed. I was like, oh no, they're closed. Ooh, this looks like a fun amusement park.
Yeah, not going to be open in March in Iowa probably, but yeah,
no,
pretty fun.
couple roller coasters, couple water rides. Oh my god, I'm looking at like old school Adventureland. That's pretty sick.
Yep.
Iowa's largest amusement park.
Yeah.
They have the title.
Yep. You guys had Six Flags. That's what I went to when I was a kid.
We had, when I was like growing up and like could ride roller coasters finally, we had Mount Olympus and Noah's Ark.
Ooh. Have you ever seen that, heard of that amusement park that like a bunch of people died at because the rides were so like crazy?
No.
I need to send you this video. It's a video by Fern, which
You know, it's going to be a good video.
Yeah, Fern did a good video. It was back in like this. It was called like, let's see, most dangerous amusement park. Oh, it was called Action Park. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Action Park. It was in New Jersey. God, Fern did a very good video on it. If you guys are just looking for like good videos in general about a variety of topics, the YouTube channel called Fern, Fern, does a really good job just with their like editing, animating, storytelling, and they're really like interesting topics. But yeah, there was like hella deaths at this action park in New Jersey, and like some of the rides they had were like freaking absurd.
There's just one that's just called the Super Slide, and it's a giant slide that should be banked a lot more around the corners. And dude, let me pull this up. Jamie, pull that shit up.
Yeah, and like a lot of people got hurt too. Like there was obviously deaths, but there was a lot of injuries as well. The people that were like working there were not like qualified. The people that ran it, like,
it's just a loop to.
Yeah, like some of these rides are freaking absurd.
Just incredible. This is nuts. This is nuts to me. Just like this obscene loop-to-loop slide.
Yeah, like what happens if you get caught? Or like I think they had a wave pool that was like a wave pool on steroids.
This is hilarious. Class Action Park.
Yes.
Just how about that kid over here in the corner, just casually getting thrown from the pool in the photo?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to that when we get done later. But we do have some other cool things that we have to get to.
Yes.
But we can always bring about Class Action Park.
Yeah. Let's circle back to that trip to Boston that you took. How it started and how you ended up there for a few extra days.
Traveled up to Boston. We had our conference meet. The plan was go in or fly in Friday, pre-meet Saturday, compete Sunday, Monday, fly home after the meet Monday. Well, we fly in before pre-meet. Coaches get a call saying, hey, here's the deal. We have a severe weather advisory. It's likely that we are going to basically combine this entire meet into a one-day meet. So we're going to take everything that has trials and finals and make them just timed finals, reseed these things. There's going to be a 3K and a 5K basically within 3 hours of each other. And the only ones that's going to have prelims and finals are 60 and 60 hurdles. Every other coach freaks out. Our coaching staff kind of looks at it and goes, this could be great for us. We thrive in chaos, which is a great thing. Go to pre-meet. Obviously, we tell our kids. Had one of our athletes' mom was staying in another hotel and didn't realize that not everybody knows. I think one of the schools was kind of being like, oh, we'll just tell them when we, like, tonight. And she's in the elevator with that team and drops that knowledge, and they just go, what? So objectively hilarious that she just ruined somebody's day by accident. But go back, come in. We have options to then essentially you can make scratches that are penalty free the night before due to circumstances, but once you go into the day, you can't scratch anybody and you can't add anybody to an event. So we scratched like 3 girls and shifted some relays around just to see if we could optimize the points. Go into meet day, which I don't know if anyone knows this, but when you care about track and field, a meet day is very stressful as a coach because not only are you managing what's going on, if you have to make adjustments, you're kind of coaching on the fly too in the relays, in some of the events, especially the longer they get. But you're also managing, 30 plus athletes and their emotions, and having, like, if you're in there and you just take that from 12 hours, they don't have time to decompress if something goes wrong, if something goes right, and recoup. It's literally like doing a multi event for the entire team who's never had to do one, and they have to have a very short memory. You get to be sad for 5 minutes. I need you to lock in another in 10. Like, it's super tough. But beautiful facility at the track at New Balance. Everything is hyped up to be so sick. So we get there. Order of events obviously happen. We have our 60-meter prelims, 60-meter hurdles prelims. We get one girl who was ranked 10th. Awesome kid. She's a senior. It's been a long journey with her, so it was really cool to see that, her in her first conference ever indoor, comes in, qualifies for the final in the 60-meter. So she comes in 10th, gets essentially like 7th, gets to the final. I have two 60-meter hurdlers hurdling. One almost runs her PR. Her PR would have got her in, but she ran just a little bit behind, took 10th. Other one runs super fast, gets in I think 6th place. Fast forward literally 20 minutes, and we're back doing the finals. So in the finals, we did the hurdles first. Hurdles come through. Athlete does fantastic, takes 4th, gets so close to the 60-meter hurdle school record. We were just excited. Again, she had been the first. This girl in the hurdler was like the first one knocked out of finals for like 3 years in a row. Finally gets in and just obliterates half the people who had been knocking her out, which was the comeuppance is sweet. 60-meter, coming into that one, like I said, this athlete, not first time being able to be running a conference, qualifying for finals, gets out after. So we made some adjustments on her blocks and the timing and getting out, the acceleration pattern. She gets out like a light, beautiful acceleration pattern, crosses the finish line. I knew when she crossed the finish line that she had broken the school record, just because, it's kind of when you know it, you see it when you know it. And I was like, I know that was fast. I didn't know if she had taken 3rd or 4th because it was like a hairline close one. And the first girl ran 7:38. And I was like, she definitely broke the school record. I thought she had run 7:4. Turns out she ran 7:49, like 7, which puts it at 7:50, but breaks the school record, point scorer. That I would say those two events became a catalyst for the entire team. From that point on, our distance crew just competed insanely for what they had in front of them. Like, a lot of these girls were doubling either 15 3K or 3K 5K. They had the DMR, the 4x8. So our 800 runners, some of them ran 800 4x8 and then hopped into 4x4. I had one that was DMR 4x8, 4x4. But 800 meter school record, 2nd place. Our throws, we had a 20 meter weight throw. Our girls took 1 and 2. We had a sizable lead going into right around like the 400. And we knew that we would typically be behind on that. And our DMR 4x8 would kind of bring us back into things. And we were kind of, like I said, we were ahead of where we thought we were going to be. So we were in a good spirit. Obviously, a couple of their schools are very loaded at some seniors in the 400 and 200. They scored some points, get ahead, I think, by 3 points on us. Oh shit moment, sirens go off and everything. DMR 4x8 occurs, and we're like, okay, we're back into this. All this kind of comes down to, which is crazy. You kind of look sadly on like the 400, 200, but like we had great races. We had the first like indoor 200 under 25 besides one athlete in like 5 years.
Wow.
So that was exciting. And she's a freshman. It just ran hard. She actually led off her 4x4 as well. So we get to essentially we're right around like the 5K and the shot put out the last 2 events. And we're kind of looking at it. Rank, he's got to get on the show because this guy is a genius. But Rink, Christian, and I. So Rink and Christian are two of our distance coaches. Obviously, myself, we're like kind of running points tables. Rink figures out essentially we need to score 15 points in the 5K, and one of our shot putters who has a shot to make finals needs to just score better than fifth. Well, they're going on. 5K's underway. Shot putters in fourth, which is great. And then the girl, shout out Adri, and she credits a Mango Fuego C4. Not me. She's crediting this to this throw. Throws enough in the shot to get into finals as well. So now we have two into finals skating in. We're like, okay, we have a real shot at this. Initial two flights go through, waiting on that. While we're waiting on the shot put final, 5K finishes, we score 15 points. Boom. Now we're looking at this and essentially we're like running the numbers again. We had knocked the team that was going to take second. We had knocked one of their people out of scoring position by this thrower getting into it. So literally we needed like seventh, I think like 6th and 7th or 6th and 8th.
6, 7.
So by the time shot put was done, we knew we had won. And then literally like everyone's just sitting there. So coming into the meet, we were essentially projected, I think like 81 points. We scored like 127. So we vastly outperformed what our projection was. It was really cool to see from the girls. Obviously, big performances, huge moments, like not letting things get too big. Obviously, there's going to be like the downs with it as well. 4x4 ran great. We made last second adjustments on the fly. We had an 800 runner who legitimately, she just ran the school record. She was like running on a high, and I was like, I think we might have to put her in on the 4x4. Goes in, drops a 56. So like it was worth it. So yeah, it's one of those ones that one was so stressful because, like I said, you're taking 48 hours of stress from before the meet, during the meet, recap, and preparing for day 2, vice versa. And you just said, hey, we're going to put this into essentially like 10 hours. So everyone is just dead afterwards. Go ahead, turn that light back on.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. Can't afford to have. I don't know if I'm not moving enough or.
Guy's so still.
Yep.
But yeah, just condensed.
Yeah. How much of the fact that you guys like overperformed from the prediction so much? Now I don't know like that's basically just based off like best times and they compare them throughout the season. So it's really tough to like actually predict that stuff. But how much of that like benefited you like from the meet being condensed versus do you think it would have been a different outcome if you would have ran normally?
Yeah, obviously, I mean,
you'll never
that's
know.
That's a really good. Yeah, I guess we'll never know.
Yeah. We could leave it at that.
It is, the condensed meet, number one, you have a lot of kids that their coaches were putting them into events based off of like the timing, the spacing, and being able to run, say, there's some schools that they run their girls in the 62 4x4. They're ripping that like quad. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing that all within 2 hours, your best performance is not going to be there. So you're going to have to pull. A lot of people we thought there was going to be a lot more scratches than there were. I think people just weren't able to handle workloads the way that they had thought they would be able to. So I think that's one thing that like definitely played to our advantage. Alongside of the fact of, obviously we have the firepower in a lot of events. Our 3K, 5K girls like ripping that double, or like the 15 3K girls like being able to rip that double, especially on short turnaround, double threshold days, stuff like that has like really prepared them for this. So when we saw that, we knew it was an opportunity versus like a detriment. And then you kind of look at, if this was spread out over 2 days, I honestly don't know if we have the same result. Just a situation's a little bit better for other people to, elevate their position in rankings based off of more rest, not essentially having to be as adaptable and agile during the meet. And I think that's where like the coaching staff that we're on, we probably it played the coaching staff and like the strategic element played a lot bigger of a role. And when we knew when that was going to happen, I was like, I'll take us versus anybody in the conference. But you know, it's a lot harder to do those wins when everybody essentially is coming in loaded to the gill and not necessarily like being put in a situation where it's like you have to try and hang on versus like I know personally my girls love running a prelim and a final in the same day. So my 60 and 60 meter hurdler girls were like, this is so much better. I hate having to come back the next day and doing that. I look at it from like a couple of my 400 runners. If they don't run well, they get literally an hour and a half to go get back after it and run that 4x4. The short memory stuff like kicks in, and it's like all the, I guess the more intrinsic, like non-measurables that like matter a lot more in those meets. Cause like, obviously you had a conference meet, everyone's going to be fast. Everyone's going to throw far. Everyone's going to pretty much jump far. Like it's about as level of a playing field as you can kind of get, other than going to like nationals where, hey, you all to qualify to be here. It's minuscule margins. So like having the ability to like thrive in what would be a situation that could break somebody off is I think that played such to our advantage. I honestly don't know if we would have won if this didn't happen. Low key, I'm just thankful it did because it's like that was sick.
Yeah. How do you talked about like the strategy? What goes into that, like leading up to like a meet? Like obviously throughout a track and field season, you might try different athletes in different events, especially like if they're like younger and like you're trying to like figure it out. Cause like, I don't know, track and field's a little bit different. Like you can run shitty or not run at all for the entire season and then show up at the important meet and do well. And that's all that matters versus like other sports, like that it's not quite the same. That's like a unique thing about like track and field is you can kind of like experiment, so to say, and you just need to get it right when the time matters. What goes on between like, what does that look like strategizing, like who goes in what event leading up throughout the season? Like, is that just like, I assume that's got to be a good amount of collaboration between all the coaches. And then how does that come together on a meet day when it's like you said, you're cramming something from 48 hours down to 12. So you're taking 4 down to 1. How does that like, and just having to be like reactive?
Yeah. So like our conference has a limit on athletes that go compete at the meets, 32 and then 35 for outdoor. So we go through and essentially like rank our athletes, not on like how we view them as a team, but like where do you sit in the conference based off of these best performances? Okay, now then we go from there and we go like 60 meter, for example. We had a girl, like I said, ranked 10th, knew she was capable of running much faster. We just had a couple acceleration mechanical things to figure out. So I was like, okay, if you're ranked 10th, and her margin from 10th to like 7th was like 0.03. I was like, you're going because you're going to score points. But I know that she had a little bit of like an adductor issue coming off of a curve and an indoor 200. So I was like, we're not going to put you in the 2. You're going to be a 60 meter merchant. Versus we had a freshman who, in all reality, she was ranked probably like 17th in the 200 as a freshman. And she was ranked like, I think 14th or not 14th. Yeah, probably like 14th or 16th, somewhere in there in the 60. But she had just dabbled in a couple 400s, ran one open 400, dropped to 57, ran 4x4s and put 57 lows on the board. If you look at this, she's like 14, 15 in the conference and the 16 in the 400, a little bit lower in the 200, or a little bit higher in the 200, and like her best technical event, like looking at it on paper, was technically the 60. Well, what we did is I said, number one, she's not confident in her 60 meter and her start, the way it's progressing. Okay, you're actually not going to go there to run the 60. You're going to go there to run the 200. Because I think we had started changing some things around and how she was training as a little bit more of a 2-4 runner indoor to help build some strength for the outdoor 100, outdoor 2, outdoor 4, and become like a more range runner. So that was like a strategic move about halfway through the season. Looking into conference, looking at the performance list, I said, you're going to go run the 200. You're not ranked high enough for, and like her PR was a little bit far off to like think about points. We put her in the 400. A, go see what you can do. I want to see if you can go do something crazy. B, when you're at a conference meet and you're in an event where the lanes cross, that's where anything can happen. Someone trips, someone falls, you're the person that makes it through. All of a sudden, coming in at 16, you are now 7. Those types of events happen. So you kind of look at it, you go, there's a lot to win out of this, but I don't know if it's like, you just got to make sure the risk versus the reward is good. And then obviously she's our first leg on the 4x4. So she's going to go there. She came in this year as a 60, 100, 200 girl. She ran our indoor conference meet as a 200, 400 girl. So that strategy kind of went into that. You have other aspects too, where, over like, when she was a girl that we cut, we scratched her from the open for, because it was like, there's no sense in trying to do this now because she's going to have 30 minutes and we need her to score the points in the 4x4. So we cut her from that 400. So that strategy talk happened literally after pre-meet coaches conversation. We went through and we said, look at our list right now. What makes sense? What doesn't? How do we scratch why? And then we just went through and submitted those. And then you look at like on the distance side, dude, that's such a hard one. Like there's a lot of strategy that happens on the distance. The multis, like you have to have strategy in how you attack a multi, but like you're not strategizing like you can put them in like one or two other events. You're not like, well, I need her on the 4x4. You're probably like, okay, this multi is going to long jump, or this one's going to do some high jump, or this one might throw shot or hurdle, whatever it is. So you don't have to think about that as much. You're more so thinking about the strategy of the 5 events that you're doing during that day.
Right.
Where do you kind of spend the energy to score your points, and where's your strength? Throws, I would say the strategy on throws, not being a throws coach, it's hard for me to tell you, but from the outside looking in, it seems to be like, hey, get on the ball. You're not going for it. It looks to me like it's a lot like jumps, where you're not going for a big jump every single time. Your first 3 jumps are working up to a big jump. It's like, get on the board, get something in there. Okay, get a little bit more aggressive, fine tune that aggressive approach for something big. And that's what it seems to be. So like that goes, but like there's a lot of like inter-event coaching while you're there. So like, it's not like a race where you prep them, you send them, watch them, and you recap. It's every piece of that event. You're like back and forth and adjusting things in a field event. So there's a lot of strategy and like technical prowess in those. But it's so crazy because, like I said, we take a 48-hour thing where you start to have these conversations over dinner after night 1 of like, okay, well, who made it to day 2 in their finals? What do these relays look like? And now this is, we changed our relay orders, I think 3 or 4 times after the initial shock of what's going on here. So our 4x8 changed, our DMR changed, and our 4x4 changed. Well, during that day, those were subject to change again. I know we changed our 4x4 lineup and order. I think we made an adjustment to our DMR, which ended up paying off very well. And I think we adjusted our 4x8 order as well, based off of some events that happened. So you have to be super reactive while getting the athletes to live in the moment and not think, 5 events down the road, because you're already thinking 5 events down the road. As soon as something happens, you have to be very reactive. You can't necessarily sit there and be like just so focused in. Obviously, like if say an athlete gets hurt, you're like, oh my God, boom, like I need to deal with that. Don't be like checked out and worrying about whatever. But as soon as that has closure, you have to make the adjustment. So you have to go through and say, like, okay, this order has to change. This relay card has to get submitted. There's been so many times that at a meet where, even if I just look at like our indoor conference meets, where I have like waited to submit our 4x4 order based off of who was ready, who was recovered, who just maybe came out of boots in like the Normatex, where is the best strategy. A year ago we ran this meet. I stood by the clerking desk and waited for the 4x8, which was the event before, to finish to see if I had two 800 runners to put in our 4x4 because of what shook out during the day with all of the sprinters. So I had two kind of like 400-meter girls, and then I had to bring in two tired 800-meter girls who just ran super hard. And we put a great time down. But it's just all that stuff. Like I said, it's not just like let them line up and run and like hang out all day. It's so stressful. You get to the end of the day and you're like just crashing.
Yeah.
And I was completely powered by C4.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about because like when you're a strength coach, when it comes time for like the game or the meet, your work is largely done. Like you might get them ready, but like you're not as involved in the actual game as like a head coach or whatever, like football for example. Like they have like a real they have a real like impact on the game, like the strategy and whatnot. So that's like something that's cool to think about is like, and I like that about it's cool because you just get to kind of like sit back and watch the game, but it's also like it's cool to actually like think about like the coaches having an impact on the competition, like within the actual competition. That's like not something that like you think of with track and field as much as like the training building up is like the big thing. But then when it comes to like a chaotic thing like that, where I don't know, I'm assuming that's like probably the first time that that's ever happened to you, where you're condensing a 2-day meet into 12 hours. Probably the first time that's happened.
I think for everybody that was there.
Everybody else. So it's like, ooh, like you said,
who's going to be adaptable?
Right, the coaching staff. Obviously, like the training that you guys did, like prepared you for that. Like if you didn't train well, like you weren't going to be able to like do that. But also like the strategy from the coaching staff and like being able to like make decisions based on all the things that you just said. You can't really quantify that in terms of like team points, but
yeah,
it definitely made a difference. So that's really cool.
It did, and I think we've talked about like you with the Cubs and how integrated you guys are with the staffing, with medical across the board. Just want to say shout out to our ATs that traveled with us and like work with us. You want to talk about an integrated model that day. So in the know of what happened at what point with what to make sure we could get them. We had 2 tables set up, 2 ATs. Some of these doubles weren't possible unless you have like those two putting in the work that they were. I don't think they could like they had their tables essentially set up next to the track so they could watch while they were working on the next athlete to get them ready. Like any soft tissue, any prep, stim, like recovery post event in order to get them ready to go back to prepare for the next event. Like they did everything that they normally do with every athlete in such less time. Like they were under the same stress and duress that we were. And like they did a great job too. So it makes it so sweet that you're like, we look at it as like that's a strength for us too. Like I know a lot of teams, like they're typically sending like a GA as an AT like out with track. It's kind of like the forgotten one where we kind of said like we have 2 ATs specifically for track and field. We brought both and like everything was set up. We didn't have to worry about that piece. So again, when it comes to like those doubles, it's like that's a strength for us. Strategy is a strength for us. Basically having super resilient kids around us that like are prepared to prepared to have condensed meets, quote unquote, be mentally tough to fight adversity. Like we were set up for success when they said, hey, by the way, we're going to 10 hours. So that helped us so much because we were like, it's fucking game time, baby, and we're ready to roll.
Yeah, that's insane. That's insane. So, another trophy for Brian's office. Long story short.
It is. It's another trophy. It's another ring. I'm up to 7.
Yep. But he's still hungry, looking for 8. Did you guys, let's see, did you guys win the cross country championship? Is the Triple Crown still in play? It is.
Cross country, indoor. We have the last leg of it in outdoor. And now it gets really fun too, because now we have 4x1. Now we have 3K steeple. Now we have jav.
Yep. 100 meter. Yep. Should be good. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I think this leads well into our next topic, speaking of track and field. Acceleration and max velocity, they're kind of two ends of the same spectrum, both important. You put something in our notes, acceleration over max velocity. Would you kind of dive into that?
Yeah. So I put this in our notes because I was thinking about this as I kind of reflected back on the conference meet and that 60-meter school record holder. I actually made a post about this, kind of alluding to it, but I think it's good to warrant a fuller conversation on it. But in the post, I essentially said, if max velocity is the rising tide that raises all ships, acceleration is what gets the boat in the damn water. Right? And I think that's why acceleration and it is more important than max V in the sense, right? Obviously, there's that little caveat, right? You can't max the muscle stimulus and the neuromuscular stimulus, all that with max V as you can with acceleration. There's a couple things you can do with acceleration, though. Number one, a good acceleration sets up a max V. If you have the fastest kid in the world and they can't accelerate for shit, it doesn't matter because they are upright and trying to pull themselves at 10 meters, they're going to falter. Just because they're fast at top end GPS time, whatever it is, doesn't mean they can efficiently get there. And I think that's where I'm acceleration is more important. If you have a 100 versus a 104, you're looking at a lean difference essentially. Now that matters in track and field, do not get me wrong. But if the 10 fly kid runs 413 in a 30-meter block start and the 104 kid runs 391 in a block start, the 391 to 104 is going to blast you out of the water. Yeah, they may not be able to it's not even going to be close because they're a great accelerator. And this is when where it kind of comes into this is where it kind of comes to you can be an efficient accelerator, and working on that matters more because you not only have the get off, the initial acceleration, early acceleration, that late acceleration into transition into max V. Max V is 10 meters of the race. Yes, it's very impactful, right? But in a 100-meter race, that's 1/10 of it. And then you kind of look into speed endurance, deceleration or anti-deceleration through the end of that, or you have 3/10 to 4/10 of that is a true acceleration. Even if you're not in the acceleration mechanics, the body mass is accelerating through that progression. And I looked back at our training, and over the indoor, I had typically always been a very max velocity, get times, get sprint float sprints, etc., all the time. I placed such an emphasis in our training waves of acceleration. I think that led to a lot of good work. So what supplemented the acceleration obviously was aerobic development on the easy days, and then a little bit more on strength side of speed endurance, and speed endurance 1 and 2, versus the speed side as an under distance but over speed kind of rep. I worked a little bit more towards the over distance. So 200 runners were running 250s versus 150s, and still hammering them, but I needed that just to make sure that they could be able to run up to the 400, if that makes sense. So like instead of underselling it and preparing them specifically, I prepared them a little bit more generally on the speed endurance side. But the acceleration stuff we were hitting at least 2, if not 3 times a week, and especially towards late season, before they hit anything long, they were hitting block starts or resisted reps. Those like more isolated days, I would say the closest thing that resembled, top speed work was we would do like a 40-meter block start, hit like 2 or 3 of those. But I feel weird saying this, but like that last 10 was the afterthought and just extending the progression almost like a race model and getting the residual effects to come through with the max V versus being like, I'm focused on how that acceleration happens. And, it led to, I think as a whole, our team, I would say like physically we were more dominant than we were the year prior, especially with some of the same girls. It led to faster times. Obviously, athletic development, the other aspects to it like play a role. But I think like we were more set up to be successful doing this and almost like really, in a sense, like extending out a short to long approach through indoor before we open things up. And as we go into outdoor, I look a lot at like it's not going to be a max V day or an ACL day. It'll be a hybrid day. Like we had just started handoffs and then we did our 4x1 handoff practice. To finish it off, we literally got on the run rocket and did resisted sprints. And I was like, this is what needs, like, I like the way this looks. Just because I think there's so much, and this is probably like me in my head a little bit of like, I'm getting a leg up, but especially in like, female track and field, they're not always going to be the best accelerators. Whereas like you grab, male track and field, a lot of these guys, especially in the sprints, I should say, they played football, they played baseball, they've done all these other sports to where it's very acceleration dominant, where they haven't always opened up and needed the max V work. Women track and female track and field, women's track and field, they're either going to be a soccer player in some point in the past, a gymnast, or they are going to essentially be a track and field runner from the minute they were 10 years old. So they've probably already done a lot of tall upright stuff. They've been lacking this. And like knowing that context, figuring out where you can get the knee angles and how you get a better progression out of those acceleration mechanics. I want to talk about think again. This was 2.5 to 4 months of me questioning my belief if I'm doing the right thing, just to have like hold out on it after challenging myself and then seeing it come to fruition at this meet. I was like, okay, like I can be vilified on like there's number one, there's multiple ways to approach this problem. Number two, this one might be more efficient. And we've had, far less injuries because of it.
Yeah. How do you think, obviously that's like a track and field perspective. Would you argue the same with like a team sport, field sport? Because that's kind of where my mind's going. I don't know as much about track and field, but like my initial thought is like, obviously they're both important. Please no one take this out of context and say like one is the only thing you should be doing. But
no, I want you to take this out of context. I want you to get pissed and comment.
That's true. Good for the engagement. But like you said, a lot of those team sports are very much acceleration dominant. It doesn't mean that you don't need top speed, and top speed's not helpful. But like you alluded to, a higher top speed isn't always result in a better time. And you can see this like when we like in my own training personally, like we'll run on the 1080 with like our training group, and like some guys might get a higher top speed, whatever, if we're doing like a 20-yard sprint with like, say, I don't know, 5 kgs of resistance, something like that, 3 kgs of resistance, nothing crazy. Someone might have a higher top speed but a slower time, and vice versa. Maybe they're just not as good of an accelerator. And it's kind of cool because with like 1080, you can see like the 0 to 5 time. So it kind of gives you like a little bit of a, not the full like acceleration profile, but it gives you a little bit of a clue into like what people are better at. But I do think it's like, obviously those sports are a little bit more acceleration dominant, like thinking about baseball and specifically like when you're thinking of base running, people that steal bases, I see people who steal bases that aren't always the fastest. Like they're still pretty fast, but then you see people that are very, very fast that like don't steal as many bases as they probably as you think that they would or should. Now, obviously, there's more that goes into that. There's like a literal like agility aspect to it, just like reacting off the pitcher, perception, action, and like
Mm-hmm.
a timing of it. There's an acceleration and there's also a deceleration because you have to slide into the bag. There's a deceleration before you start to initiate that slide. And, the bases are only 90 feet apart. You're not getting a max V. Obviously, if you have a higher max velocity, theoretically, you're going to, you're whatever, if you get up to 80% of your top speed, that 80% is going to be greater. But I do think, and another thing is like, obviously, you can train acceleration probably a little bit more often than max V just because it's less systemically fatiguing. Like you could theoretically train it close to every day in some capacity, whether that's just like, resisted, unassisted, or resisted, unresisted, whether it's just like short starts, 5 yards, 5 to 15 yards. So how do you think that applies to like a team sport model? That's kind of like where my mind goes as far as that. Like everything starts from, and the thing is also like you said, everything has to start with acceleration. That boat has to get into the water somehow. You have to push it. Everything in sport, pretty much, like you're going to be at a standstill, whether it's out of the blocks and track, whether that's starting from the batter's box or on the bases in baseball, whether that's setting up on the line in football. Everything starts from a standstill, and you have to accelerate out of it.
Even on a change of direction, like you're having a small moment in time where you are at zero.
Right.
Either way.
The change of direction is you go to zero and you have to accelerate out.
Yeah, like I think the scale tips even further towards acceleration in team sports. Being so acceleration dominant, it's one of those things that, and this is a really good theory that like I've DeMarco and I have like talked about, had not arguments but like very good like thought provoking conversations on this. And he made a really good point. I think this is a good point to make here. A 10, like I had mentioned with like that 101 to 104, like that's a lean, and in team sports that's less of an important thing. But the difference between a 124, on a 1+9, if you're doing like a 10 yard, so like we'll just say like a 136 versus a 144 and a 10 yard, that's huge. And team sports is the name of the game is separation. If you're on defense, you want to close separation. If you're on offense, you want to create it. That's what it is. Get in space, close space. Acceleration either closes space or opens space, and that will allow whatever requisite top speed you have to continue to further that, or it'll negate that entirely, because if you have the ability to create a ton of space in 5 yards, if you're within 5 yards and you create 3 yards of space and you're running, well, now 3 things occurred because it's a chaotic environment. Number one, the defensive player has to then accelerate harder and possibly have to do a PR, which is extremely strenuous on the system and extremely fatiguing, in order to prevent that from happening. Good luck trying to repeat that one more time, buddy. Number two, it takes less of the effort to accomplish the task at hand. A more submaximal jump, because you're not having to do a complete jump ball, or a slower effort or less intensive effort in order to get under a deep ball, if I look in terms of football. Or if you're going for a pop fly, instead of having to be on a dead sprint all the way through, if they can get out and get underneath there, they're able to then make a better judgment call because they're not straining looking for that ball. They're essentially slowing down, gathering, getting that placement. Those things matter. And the acceleration, I feel like if we're efficient and good at doing it and we're fast accelerators and we place an emphasis on that in training, you then create bandwidth to slow the game down. right? Versus like if you're a very bad accelerator but good top end, you're probably coming into those instances in a little bit more of a strain because you're just relying on essentially turning on the afterburners, as everyone always says. But you're 3 steps behind where you need to be, and you're going to strain. When you're straining, you're almost like leaving that door open to make those mental mistakes. And I'm not a huge fan of that, to be honest, just from putting in the kids in the position to have to do that. But yeah, I do think it places a bigger emphasis on acceleration. The other aspect too is that they're sprint generalists. They're not sprint specialists. Track and field is sprint specialists, meaning obviously the outputs aren't as high, but if you're at like the Division 1 or at the professional level, obviously there is some, for lack of a better term, there's some fucking kind of output on those kids. You know what I mean? So you can't play the argument, well, they're not as like, they don't have high outputs, so like it's not going to matter as much. They won't hurt themselves. You're Division 1, you're professional. Clearly there's some kind of level of output. Like you're at the level where there's going to be an issue if something goes wrong. Right? But in Max V, your mechanics are way better, or have to be way better to accomplish the task at hand. Being a sprint generalist, I know SMU Labs always does the great kinematic of like a professional male 100-meter runner versus like a professional football player, what the gait looks like. The professional football player has a incredibly like much lower technically, but a much higher value of anterior pelvic tilt. They then become more backside and elongated stride versus that perfect like cyclical motion. There's probably also a lot more heel striking and a lot more forefoot striking from the inside or the broad side of the foot versus in track and field, they're going to have a little bit more glenohumeral rotation, etc. It's a little bit sloppier to say in a field sport athlete because that's not what they do 24/7. Who of those do you feel like you should be sending out regularly to rip, a 10-yard, a 20-yard fly, whatever it is, constantly? And then you put the meathead minds into it in a lot of like field sports. Basketball, maybe not so much, but there's also such a short area that like their whole game is acceleration and intensive tempo, if anything else. But in baseball, in football, what do those dudes love to do? They love to do 2 things: lift and then basically just get excited.
Yeah.
You really don't meet a ton of like extremely introverted, just like corner of the room people in those 2 sports. And that's great for those sports. Those guys are wondering, those teams are going to want to compete. And then you get like the lacrosse teams, both men and women, that like they're kind of like that too. Some of the women's soccer teams just like they want to get after it. I vastly remember when you would train women's soccer on Saturdays, like
Saturday lifts.
Those girls got after it, right? But like put them in there and they see someone goes fast, they're going to want to get another rep. Things can unravel really quickly. But if you're in a 10-yard, take 2-3 more because it's 10 yards. Your likelihood based off of where you're striking the ground in position to your body and stress on the most detrimental tissue, which would be the hamstring, is so much decreased in comparison to the top speed versus like we know for a fact that like we can get hamstring stimulus from the muscle tissue for adaptation at roughly, 90% of that top speed. That 90%, like we look at like from American football, you're like 16 to 16 and a half yards, depending on the average speed of the team. You can hit 16 to 16 and a half and 15 yards. Like I've mapped it out based off of acceleration models. That's not that fast. That's enough stimulus to continuously make sure that the hamstring is robust enough to handle top speed. And some guys will take it a little bit further and they get faster, and that's great. But you're also building it in to be safer as a training model, to be repeatable. And at the end of the day, especially in the off season, going into like camp, you're preparing them for camp, not for games. Because for games, they have an easy day before, a pretty slightly easy day the day before that. In camp, it's 2 days aren't a thing anymore, but it's like back-to-back high days. How do you build that into training? We can't sprint top end back-to-back days. You are begging for an injury. You do that with accelerations.
Right.
And you just get shorter and shorter throughout that week as you have to stack those days up. Um, I just think it's such a valuable thing, and I almost took, like I said, a little bit more of my approach to team sports and threw that in track and field and got great results. Um, so I like this argument actually kind of like, I guess, like came from team sport performance coaching coming over to track and field versus like track and field sprint coach comes to team sport. And I just think it led to some great results. But I know this is going to have people pissed.
Yeah. This is something that I've been thinking about too. It reminds me of, because when like in my situation right now, like where guys play, when the season starts, we'll play 6 games a week for essentially 6 months. It's much different versus like a track meet or like a football game where like you have a lot more time to prepare for each game or each competition. Or like for track and field, like someone wouldn't even have to compete. They could compete like once before the conference meet during the whole season, and that's completely acceptable. And I think something that we've talked about like as a staff and gone back and forth on is like, should we still do like programmed running for like position players in season? Because like potentially, like you said, like you wouldn't want to train max fee on back-to-back days, but in the chaotic sport of pro baseball, theoretically, like if a guy's an everyday player, they might hit a top end or like rack up. They can and likely will at some point rack up high speed running distance, whatever you determine that as. If it's more than like 80% or 85%, they could do that every single day. They could do that, 3 days in a row, 5 days in a row, 6 days out of 7. And obviously, like, yeah, like people talk about like workload management, and like we use, catapult is very prevalent in a multitude of sports, but the goal is always to try to keep the player on the field. Like we don't want to use that as a crutch to be like, oh, like catapult says this, so we need to take him out of the game, because the goal at the end of the day is to have the best players on the field and to win. But I think that like acceleration, like you said, like it's very prevalent in team sport. And I think I still think that's a way to like train speed qualities outside of the game itself during a season where, it's really long. There's a lot of, every day is game day, especially when, if you have tools like, whether it's a run rocket or an Exergenie or a 1080, something like that, or resisted sprint device where like, you can kind of do their force velocity profile, what resistance that specific player needs to keep them under a certain miles per hour. And you can kind of work accelerations at that resistance to keep them under that intensity. That's an idea that I've kind of been thinking about for the last couple of days. So I think that's potentially like a way to still work speed. Obviously, like when you're in season with football, I know like Coach DeMarco is kind of lets practice, and I like a lot of people are starting to let like practice take care of the high speed exposures if able, which I think is good, especially like if you have GPS, like that's kind of the way to go.
GPS or input on the practice plan.
Yep, exactly. Ideally both. But are we leaving something on the table by not doing some sort of like structured speed work within the competitive season?
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily like a right or wrong answer. It's just something I've been thinking about, especially when your season's very long.
It is. That's where it gets tough. And it's like, especially in baseball, you think like the longest training block of the year that they have is in season, which is such a tough scenario. And, you want guys to feel good, but you also want them to develop, especially like we talked about, like at the levels that you've been at, where it's like development is the main key to be able to get them to progress throughout your guys' system. So you have to do something. And this is the other thing that you kind of think about too. It's like, we talk about like high speed exposures basically happening within practice. High speed exposures are great. High intent exposures are another thing that we might want to be looking at. And the hard part is how the hell do you measure intent, right? I don't think it has to be, it's something as simple as a race waterfall starts, whatever it is. If we can get high intent and we can work on some of those things, we can get the exposures later, but have the intent right now. I think that's a big win for it. And, you know, the more we can accumulate the contacts or the accumulate the accelerations, I think that's a big thing too, right? Like if you look at the number of accelerations that, I mean, baseball's probably a little bit easier to map out than football just because each play is so structured. Or you could legitimately watch one person on film and be like, okay, I know for a fact like you had, 6 ABs, you got on base 4 times, so that's 4 true accelerations. Watch their outfield play, watch their infield play, whatever it is that they're doing. It's like, okay, you've accumulated 48 accelerations during this period. Well, I know that we need to get 48 to prepare for things like in a game if that's our average. It's really easy to add in a 3 hard steps, a 3 hard step progression, even if it's at 70, 80, 90, 100%. You just collected 8 of them if you do both sides within your prep during that day. It's very easy to start accumulating those and get I hate the term like muscle memory. I like to think of it a little bit more as like subconscious cueing, to where that comes through, that they're not actively having to think about how they accelerate. It now becomes innate. And just because of enough exposure to that stimulus. And I think that's the thing that often gets overlooked. I know people, they love an artificial decel. I think it's whatever. I like true, like either structure change of direction or agility over that, because you get like the game speed aspect to it too. But and the other thing that people forget about with like an acceleration is that you can do it from you can vary it so much and still get an acceleration angle, whether you're going from a crossover step, a push to a move, straight up, change the multi-position starts, all these different things that they might encounter and they're more likely to encounter within a game instead of true straight line top end mechanics. Even if we think about like, snake run. I remember when you were at Elon, we would get out in the field and just chase snake runs on each other. But like even then you're kind of in an accelerated position because you have that lean.
So I'm saying, like in baseball specifically,
You're always in that lean.
yeah, like top speed does occur, but I mean, like a home to first, like dig it out single is probably like a straight line through. Like you're trying to buy a hit.
That's like the only spot it's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's when you'll see guys hit like like they 120 miles an hour, like in game, like a 30 feet per second, close to a 30 feet per second, 29, 30 feet.
But if someone's going first
but
to
if
third,
it's a double, like first to third, they might get it, but it's a curved. It's
a curve. You're leaning in.
Yeah, like
it's
if
an
someone
arc.
hits, right, it is. Like if you ever seen like the path of like someone who hits an inside
Like the base running path, yeah.
Yeah, and inside the park home run, it's a circle. They do a big circle run because, and like the way you run bases, like if you're going to second, you're not just going to go straight to first and then push off. You're going to take a little bit of a curve out into the grass, a little bit outside of the baseline to round into second. And you're kind of always in this. The only time you're really like upright and top is like if you're running straight through first. See, exactly. Great visual. So it's a little bit different. And even like with like in the outfield, you could get top speed or at least like a high speed exposure. But it's a little bit different too because one, they're always tracking the ball. Mm-hmm. They might be running, they might be essentially doing like a crossover run. They're going to be running at an angle to try to track the ball. I think having I may be like looking too far into the details, but I think having the glove on the hand also like impacts the mechanics and like you're trying to.
You have a weight distribution.
Exactly. So like that plays into it a little bit. It is different, but I do think like you said, acceleration is important for those reasons. And I think one thing that I really like about resisted sprinting, whether that be bands, Exergenie, 1080, Run Rocket, whatever it is you can get high intent with
With lower
sub-maximal
stimulus.
intensity. Yeah, like high intent without maximal intensity, whether that's just like shortening the distance, 5 yards to 10 yards, or just cranking up the resistance. Like they're going to be trying, they're going to be exerting internal effort-wise, exerting a lot of internal effort, but the constraint of the implement or the modality is going to restrict them from going past a certain velocity. Now, obviously, you're probably going to get more like a muscular stimulus versus like a central nervous system, but I think it's a good way to still like sneak in high intent acceleration work, especially during like the competitive season, without blowing guys up.
I mean, there's something to be said too about the fact that because it's sub-max true intensity on the body globally, it's more repeatable. And it being more repeatable, you can add more and have higher training volumes, be able to stack that up. And I think that's what people don't understand is we are very volume averse as an industry right now. I truthfully think so. We've talked about this, in track and field, where it's like if I'm minimal effective dose, track and field's a sport where you peak. I can't taper you if I have nothing to taper from. And then you kind of look at it from like a field sport perspective or a court sport, and it's like, is there something to be said about somebody who has a higher training volume, like a little bit more chronically? Just knowing that they, obviously you don't have to skyrocket them and just be like, we're going to grind you to a meat bone. But like, if you're smart about it, you do the right thing and say your average training volume is like, just for simplicity's sake, 8,000 versus 10,000 pounds in a week, or, 3,000 yards versus 1,000 yards. Is the 3,000 and 10,000 more equipped to be on the field than the 2,000 or 1,000, 8,000? Probably, especially if like it's done with enough intent to where like that's like relatively normal to them. Because now you're not comparing, the average of each both. You're saying like, oh well, this person's like more fresh because they've done less. It's like either that they might be underprepared, because maybe their average is actually 3,000, 10,000, and they've just been operating at 1 to 1 and 8. I've started to really think about that one, and Kel and I have had these conversations too, especially as athletes become higher in training age. A lot of people get very much to the effect of like, well, they need less because they're so like wiry, the outputs are so high, you can't do it. And it's like, he's really looked at it from the baseball perspective, and he's like, some of these like our advanced training guys, we look at a guy like Micro. He needed more because he's like, I feel like I'm still getting warm. If it's 4 sets of 3, he's got to hit a 5th optional set or a 6th, because he's like, I'm still like feel like I'm getting warm after doing the same prep as everybody else, but like this movement is getting grooved now. Though those things are just, I feel like we undersell the importance of putting some volume underneath someone's belt.
I 100% agree. Like, stronger you are, the more sets it takes you to get to your working set too. So like the more time you need. And I mean, look at steroid era baseball. Like,
hell yeah.
For whatever you think about it, like that's proof that like bigger, like stronger, like people, like that's the fact that like you think that, I don't know, I feel like people undersell like whatever you think about like strength standards, but like people are, how many like you see a lot of football players that are able to like bench 315 to like 365, and that's like expected. But then when it comes to like baseball players, we want to like
coddle it.
We want to fucking dumbbell bench and not do anything overhead. Like, I think it's, I don't know. That's a discussion for another episode. But yeah, I think people are a lot. An athlete isn't just advanced because they've been in your program for 3 years. They're advanced because like the stuff that you're doing like is no longer stimulating them, and that doesn't mean like just because they're a junior or senior doesn't mean that they're quote unquote advanced. You like people that are from, I will say, like, if you compare, like, from my experience, like international signees versus like draft guys who have been to college, like on average, obviously, like a draft guy is going to have more of a training background, but they're also going to be older, and not all of them have like a super solid training background. Like,
Yeah.
I'd really think about like trying to think of like athletes that I know like in our minor league system that I would be like, okay, like they're more like quote unquote advanced or have like enough training age that like warrant something different. And it's like I can think of like three, like over, like I can think of like maybe, like I can't think of very many because it's not.
You know, when we think about it and we get there, I mean, obviously for me, like right now, especially in track and field, it's the complete opposite. All my internationals, like just much higher training age,
Right.
much obviously much more advanced, but they also like the system set up a little bit less about like, high school sports having fun. Teachers are like the coaches, where they're like in a development system and having coaches.
Yeah.
So that kind of changes, but you know, I have a pretty advanced 400 meter hurdler, and obviously as you kind of deload at indoor conference, you don't want a true taper, but I deloaded him, and she just kind of was like, I feel like I'm not in shape because we didn't do as much this week, and I'm like, that's like a little bit of one of those like situations where you're like, okay, like this verifies the fact of like we're not just battling freshness. Like they also like some of them want that like workload just in the sense of like a mental component of like I'm in shape because I did 7x300 as my tempo work again. You walk it back a little bit, but still keep it. Like those things are important too, and I think there's a mental aspect to it, especially in track and field. It's a mental sport that people don't want to admit, but it's true. Us both having like competed in it, like you understand, like when you line up to the line and you're not confident, you're about to have a rough fucking day. But likewise in baseball too. Like if they're like checked out mentally, like you think about a pitcher who's not just locked in, you're gonna be out, and that bullpen's gonna be warming up pretty soon here, buddy.
Yep. You're gonna be doing a lot of this.